Good evening. We will get started. It's 4:30 tonight, and as people come into the waiting room, we will admit them. But as we get started tonight, tonight's kind of exciting. We're going to have some panelists, both from a district in Colorado and a district from Kansas City, Missouri. And so just kind of as a preview to as we get started, we're going to run it much like we did the diversity panel last week. So when we admit the panelists, I am going to ask everyone to turn their screen or their video camera off. That way the live photos are on the first page of Zoom and we can capture that as we record this. It also allows those who are watching on YouTube to kind of focus on those that are speaking. We will start with introductions. Dr. Hackett and Mr. Sawyer will introduce our guests. They both worked with these colleagues previously. And then I will call on community members to ask the questions. Many of you submitted questions. And so the questions that I sent back out to you today, if you could, I'll call on you to ask those questions. And then I will kind of direct who we ask those questions of. That way, not everyone is answering every question. That way, we'll get through a few more questions tonight. We had some questions come in late, but are some amazing questions that you all have. So please, if you want to add questions that that come up as we have the panel, you can add those to the chat and we will try to get those at the end. If not, we can have a conference call and get some of those questions answered that way, and or ask them if they would mind just answering a few more questions in the written format so that we ensure that we get all the information from them that we want. And then again, if you have additional questions, we will put those in the chat. So do you guys have any questions right now on how we'll function for the panel tonight? Okay, everybody's good. I think I heard back from most everybody that had a question that I'll be directing a question to ask. And then they're joining us about, well, 4:40, 4:45. Hopefully they log in a little early and we'll get a few more minutes out of it. I was thinking this might take us a little bit longer than it is. So, but thank you all for joining tonight.
Yeah, before they get there, this is Bone Break, and I'm wondering, is there any place in the United States that's really going 10.5 months a year rather than just spacing out the school to fill out a calendar? Because I don't see any way teachers unions will go for that.
So one of the first questions we'll ask them, Dr. Bonebreak, is if they added days to their calendar or if they just balanced their calendar to get an idea, at least from our panelists tonight.
Okay.
And Ms. Wallace, can you remind me, when is our next meeting? Is it March 25th?
I will double check that before we, and I'll email it out. How about if I email it out? It's always the hour before Equity Council, and it's generally always on a Thursday.
Okay, I think it's March 25th. Thank you.
That is the date that I have on our calendar, Ms. Wallace, if that's helpful.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, great.
While we're waiting for the next few minutes, perhaps those who have questions might want to just share what those questions are so the rest of the committee is prepared and we're using this time. I think Ms. Sharp, the first question will go to you. Do you want to share the question just with the committee?
Yes, sorry. Question one will be, what successes have you seen? Was there an increase in student achievement?
Ms. Stewart Campbell?
Yeah, so my question is what is the recommended way to implement a balanced calendar, extended school year? That's another question, is what to call it. But the best way to implement it, to just like pilot it perhaps at one school, and then the follow-up to that is, if you pilot it at an elementary school, then it's only logical in my mind that you would need to as well at a middle school and at a high school, thinking of siblings. You can't have one child on one calendar and your other children on a different calendar. So that's going to be my question.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haas?
My question is, what were the greatest challenges that came up, and what did you do to solve them or try to solve them?
Ms. Pomeroy?
Yes, my question is, how much buy-in did you have from your staff before shifting to year-round school or a balanced calendar? How much turnover did you have, if any? And did you find it difficult to recruit staff?
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gruder?
My question is, how do you recommend promoting the balanced calendar to all constituents? There are many already opposed, knowing very little about it, so effective PR advice is appreciated.
A follow-up to that question is, did various stakeholders have choice in participating? That would be families, staff, and administrators. And then Dr. Gray?
Yes, my question is, how was the change rolled out to the community?
Ms. Backus?
What was your district's driving principle or the goal behind the change in calendar? And are there other ways to accomplish that goal through methods that don't change the calendar?
Thank you. And Ms. Miller?
My question is, how would a changed calendar impact sports competitions with the district choosing a different academic calendar?
And Ms. Toyne?
What are the recommended times of the year when there are breaks? And a follow-up, after which break does a student advance to the next grade level?
And Dr. Hackett?
What are the increased costs that a balanced calendar would incur?
Thank you. And then some additional questions that came in late this afternoon are, how long or how far in advance did you plan before implementing? Were you able to work with your community partners for childcare options, and how has that worked? And what are the benefits that you're hearing from staff after the fact? And did you offer options for your staff and parents that perhaps wanted a traditional calendar? So, and some of those questions were wrapped up in others.
Now, but whether it's year-round or extended, those are completely different answers for all of those questions. So you decide one way or the other.
Well, we will clarify that when they kind of share with us what their model is before we start the panel discussion. So we do have at least one of our panelists who is now in the waiting room. So as we get ready to start, just a reminder that we will all turn off our video cameras and screens, mute ourselves, and then tonight our role is to be listeners and to learn from people from across the country. So thank you. Mr. Gowan, do we have panelists in the waiting room?
We do not, but we do have the one panelist that I've admitted in.
Okay. We will go ahead and, because we have a limited amount of time, we'll go ahead and get started. And then, Mr. Gowan, as others enter, please have them join us.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. So our panelist that we have with us at this time is Dr. Copeland. And Dr. Hackett, would you please introduce her?
It is my pleasure. Hello, Dr. Copeland.
Sorry, unmuted. Okay, hello.
Hello. Well, you're here serving as a panel member, and we're so excited to have you. Team, I've had the opportunity to know Dr. Copeland for 9 years, going on 10 almost. She is a dynamic elementary school principal, but I can tell you that she was carefully chosen to fill this role because we knew where her passions lie. And I think you'll learn tonight that she's very passionate about the success of her students and her teachers and their families. So welcome, Dr. Copeland.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be here tonight.
Well, and we appreciate you being here. And right now you are our lone panelist. I do know we had one cancellation. It just came up on my chat. And then we have a couple that are running behind. So, oh, and one that's coming in right now.
Dr. Copeland, I wanted to let you know, and I should say, is at the elementary principal at Wynwood Elementary in North Kansas City Schools, and that's in Kansas City, Missouri.
Dr. Copeland, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and in Kansas City, Missouri, and different positions that you've had and how you came to be there?
Sure. I've been a building administrator for 19 years, the last 8 of which have been here at Wynwood. And for the past 6 years of that 8 years here at Wynwood, we have been what is called by the state of Missouri a modified calendar school. And so we add in those 6 years, we've added an additional 30 days, of instructional time, 30 or 31, depending on the year. Of instructional time to our calendar, which actually, like for a child like my own who has gone here since kindergarten, it has added an additional calendar year of education to her life. So that's the power of this. So we've done that for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I was at Davidson Elementary here in North Kansas City Schools. And prior to that, I was the founding principal and superintendent at Derek Thomas Academy, which is a charter in Kansas City, Missouri. So all of my administrative experience as a principal has been here in Kansas City. I also was an assistant principal prior to that in Dallas Independent School District, and then was a teacher in Wichita Public Schools, is where I started after graduating from Bethel College in Newton, Kansas. So that's a little bit about my story as a building administrator.
Thank you. And we do have Dr. Robinson, who has joined us now. So Dr. Sawyer, would you like to introduce her, please?
Absolutely. So prior to coming to Topeka, I had the privilege of being a district administrator and an assistant principal in Colorado Springs, Colorado. During my time there, the district had approved 2 elementary schools to be a balanced calendar school. And one of those was under Dr. Robinson at Stratmore Hills Elementary. She's a fantastic veteran principal that I'm so happy we've had the pleasure of being able to bring on this panel.
Thank you. And then Dr. Robinson, would you mind sharing just a little bit of information about yourself and your various roles?
Well, I have to apologize for the moment. I ended up going to a doctor's appointment with my daughter, so I hope you guys can hear. I'm in a car at the moment, but heading home. But as Troy said, I actually Troy as a district coordinator, as principal, and he actually, for his dissertation, did work on some of our data. He included that in his research. And so we were a year-round school for about, I think it was 3 years. I'm sure my years get a little confused. And so I actually enjoyed it, but I want to save all of that, I guess, for the questions that will be asked. I've been a principal at Stratmore Hills for about 16 years. I taught in the district prior to becoming principal, and I look forward to sharing my knowledge and helping you guys making this decision.
Thank you. So on just one quick question, Dr. Robinson, in your building, is it a balanced calendar or did you add extended days?
We actually had somewhat of a modified when we were year-round. They've changed us back to the regular traditional calendar. We were modified. What we did is we were 45 days on, 15 off. During those 15 days, students were really off only 1 week. We brought our kids back for reteaching, pre-teaching, and kind of like for 2 of those weeks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So as we work through this, we wanted to bring the voices of all of our committee and stakeholders to the table tonight. And so I will ask various committee members to ask their questions, and then I'll direct the questions to the 2 of you. So Ms. Sharp, please, if you could ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Wallace. To our panelists, if you could please share what successes you have seen, and was there an increase in student achievement as a result of the calendar change?
Dr. Copeland.
Sure. Absolutely. It's been a radical change in our student achievement data since we added the additional time. We actually added 3 weeks in July, 3 weeks in June, 3 weeks in July. So we start our new school year in June. So children actually roll to their next grade level in June, as opposed to waiting to roll to their next grade level in August. So that actually front loads with 6 weeks of instruction prior to the rest of the district starting. And then we start, we follow the district's calendar for August through May. And because of those additional 6 weeks, we have almost zero summer regression. That was one of the primary reasons why we began as a modified calendar school, was to decrease and hopefully eliminate the summer regression that was occurring in our school over the June and July and beginning of August break that our students were having. And so that has really been the primary benefit for us. Also, just the community involvement and the parent involvement, because our students are here with us 12 months of the year, has been we've increased those numbers significantly as well, and in turn have far stronger partnerships with our families than we had previously.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson.
As far as our school, it's the data. What we did is, because we have a very high mobility rate. So what we did, we took a cohort of students, and in our opinion, we felt that we decreased the summer slump. But at district level, it just seems that when we look at overall, because of our mobility rate, that summer slump kind of was sustained. But in our internal data, we felt kids were coming back to us a little bit higher, and we use Dibbles. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that platform for reading, but that was kind of like our more, I would say, the assessment tool that
Okay, we will move on to the next question, and hopefully Dr. Robinson's audio gets restored. Oh, there you go. Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Yes, thank you. My question is, how do you recommend a district go about with such an initiative? Would you recommend starting at like a pilot program at one school, or just full on the entire district moves to this balanced calendar, I'm going to call it? And the follow-up to that is, if you pilot like an elementary school, then would we not also need to do so at a middle school and a high school when we think of families and siblings? Thank you.
Dr. Copeland.
Okay, so as far as whole district implementation, or just building by building, we just have, in our district, we have 2 schools. So it's Wynwood and Crestview that it was on our balanced scorecard several, like 7 or 8 years ago, to have, at that point, it was 1 school. And then it ended up being that the data aligned, and it really needed to be 2 schools. And so that has worked well for us. I think it would be astronomical financial undertaking for a district to have an entire district that was year round, because of the fact that, like in our case, the teachers are paid their daily rate for the additional 30 days, and they're not paid like a summer school stipend like they would have been before, for the time that they work in June and July. And so it is costly. You have to think, cost of just even utilities, busing, food service, all of those pieces. So it wasn't something that our district was going to do district wide. We also have, 23 elementary schools. And so that would have been too big of a project, I think. And I think the biggest thing there is you have to do what your community is desiring and what the interest level is within your community as well. And there definitely was interest in our school communities, although I don't know that there would have been throughout the entire district. We do not have a middle school or a high school that does the modified calendar. The students at those grade levels are often involved in a significant amount of other activities, programs, and things that line up with the traditional calendar, whether that be sports or academic enrichment activities or those kinds of things that are offered at 6 through 12. That just made more sense that they remained on that calendar. Plus, there's not the issue of student supervision because students in grades 6 through 12 aren't little, and so they can be home in the summer as well. And so that hasn't been something that our district has explored as far as the 6 through 12 concept. And our students have gone and adjusted famously into the 6th grade center and the 7th and 8th grade. We have 6th grade center and then 7th and 8th grade and then 9 through 12. So there's been no adjustment issues as far as, going from the modified calendar into what we call in our district, the traditional calendar. So that's what's worked for us, but certainly it would have to be based on what is best for the community that you serve.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson, the question was around if your district piloted one building or if multiple buildings, and any questions about the need for it to be vertical with a middle school or high school in the event there are siblings.
We had that conversation in our district. We piloted only 2 elementary schools, and it was extremely challenging. Now, there were no problems with pay because the way they adjusted the calendar, all teachers still had 183 or 4 contract days. So they adjusted it that we were still working the same amount of days. The calendar was just shifted a little. We ran into challenges because some of it really worked out. So for example, we're starting school in early July. We've worked out all the kinks, the 2 elementary schools, of any of the new rollouts or initiatives, because we had already, for example, if it was a new curriculum, we're already working in that new curriculum because the other schools have not started yet. It became a challenge because at the district level for them, as they're always making rollouts or new initiatives, or even just trying to put things on the calendar, they're always having to shift because they have these 2 schools who are on a different calendar. So that may be something that you want to think of when it comes to testing your state assessments and so on. We thought about a middle school, more of a vertical, and a high school, but because we do not have any high schools truly on that calendar, athletics, it's just as she stated, it was just that athletic calendar and all of that would have become somewhat of a challenge when it comes to sports. But we do have a District 49, that's somewhat on a modified year-round, so they actually make it work. And what it is they just have a 2-week fall break. They have like an extended their winter break, and then summer is a little bit shorter. So again, it's more of a modified year-round versus a true year-round calendar. But that's something to think about at your district level. If you only have a few schools here doing it, there's always those hiccups for the traditional calendar.
Thank you. Mrs. Haas, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you. My question is, I have 2 of them actually, they're together. What were the greatest challenges that came up, and what did you do to solve them or try and solve them? Thank you.
Dr. Copeland.
Oops, sorry. And now you can hear all the pinging of my my email. So sorry about that. Challenges that have come up. I mean, there is a different level of rigor and I don't know, being able to sustain the calendar that we do, because our teachers do not have the same amount of days off as the traditional calendar. So it's not a balanced calendar approach. It's literally like you don't have June and July off. And so that has been a challenge. I think people have certainly adjusted to that pace now that we're into it, 6 years in. But the first year that we started year round, there were some that just said, this just isn't for me. This isn't for my family. It just doesn't work for our family and things. And so we did have some turnover after that first year. And since then, there's very little turnover. We're very upfront about the drive that it takes to stay positive and on task with our students when others are on vacation, and we're still grinding it out in the classrooms and teaching our students. And so that is a challenge that we've faced. Initially, we did have some families that opted out, so that lowered our enrollment some. So that's not, I mean, certainly the program needs to be based on who wants to be there and who has opted into that program. But so there was a slight decrease in our enrollment. But now we have families that actually move to our community because they want the full 12-month program. So that's kind of adjusted over the 6 years that we've been doing this program. But that was an initial challenge, and how we overcame that is we allowed the parents choice. We said, even though our school is a year-round school, or we go to school 12 months of the year and we have the additional instructional time, definitely we provided busing and options for families to go to a different school if this calendar didn't work for their family dynamic. So that's kind of how we overcame those challenges.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson.
Our challenges were very similar to Dr. Copeland's, but the biggest, we did a survey prior to going year round, and part of that survey was just making sure our parents were not in need of daycare. So the other school definitely had a bigger need for daycare. So what we did is the district supported, if Terman Elementary, the other school, needed daycare, we had a program that supported the before after school, also at a very, very low cost, the 3 weeks that we would be out if the students did not opt to come back for the 2-week pre-teach or enrichment. Our kids would be bused from our school up to Terman because their need was bigger. So we were able to provide a very affordable childcare. So that worked out. We lost 7 families, and within those families, because of choice, that was 13 students. So we did lose 13 students because we went year round, but they were able to go to neighboring schools. The biggest part was just educating our community on the rationale behind this. So we used a lot of the data from out of California with the modified plan, just showing them what we would be doing and how we would be reinforcing skills, sustaining skills, and also with the enrichment. So the biggest challenge was just selling the parents on, they will still get breaks. People are really, they still believe in, summers. This is why we're on this the traditional calendar, because summers were needed for farming and all of those pieces. And it's really hard to educate the community on the needs. So the biggest challenge was just making sure we kind of chunk and chewed. We did a survey, we had community town hall. And again, it was the biggest, making sure our families knew if you needed daycare or any, vacations and so on. Again, we would be in school sometimes when their middle schooler would be out. So it's, if you don't do a vertical, it sometimes, it just doesn't support the family's calendar. That was our biggest challenge.
So, Dr. Robinson, just as a follow-up, I got the impression from previous comments that you are no longer on the balanced calendar. Is that correct?
No, we're not. And it was more of a district decision. It was really great to hear parents were a bit upset. So we heard more from parents changing it back to traditional versus when we were going to the modified calendar. But it was just very challenging for our district to have these two outliers. And we're a small district. We have 22 schools, I believe. And having just two, making so many plans for two schools, that's a big feat for the district to make all of these adjustments for two elementary schools, and then everyone else is on that traditional calendar.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Pomeroy.
Thank you. My question, and Dr. Copeland, you addressed parts of this question already, but I don't know if you might want to expand on it a little bit. My question kind of goes to staffing. So just in terms of how much buy-in did you have prior when you were in those planning stages? And did you find that you had high staff turnover, which you kind of spoke to just a little bit? And as a follow-up to that, did you find it difficult to recruit these last few years, to recruit teachers into your calendar system?
Okay, so first of all, teachers in our district, when it was determined that we were going to be modified calendar schools, all teachers were given the option to transfer to another placement within our district. So everyone was guaranteed a job. It was really important to our leadership team that people were here that wanted to be here. And also just because of the way that contracting works, because we run our calendar June through May, but we all know that contracts in a school district run July through June. So that first year, people had to actually commit to a 2-year commitment because of how the contracts are structured and when the start of our school year was. So all of that was front loaded up front. We had many meetings with staff to explain all of those details and just how the pay would work, all of those pieces. And so people really had an opportunity to ask questions to central office staff, HR staff, to myself around what this specifically would look like for them, and then make that decision based on if that was best for them professionally and with their family dynamics, et cetera. So that first year, that's when they were offered that opportunity to go to a different school in the district. So there was some turnover that year. And then also, like I said, the year after the 2-year contract, essentially, there was some turnover that year. And since then, I may have 1 or 2 teachers a year that leave. And so as far as recruiting, it's not an issue at all. Honestly, there's such a difference as far as how much more my teachers are paid because they're paid their daily rate for an additional 30 days or 31 days, depending on the calendar for each specific year, that it makes us very, very marketable, particularly for younger, for not necessarily age in actual chronological age, but beginning level teachers that would be at the top left of the pay scale, for example. It's very enticing as far as that goes. But we talk very candidly in the interviews about how hard this work is, the tenacity that you have to do this work 12 months of the year. We all know how hard it is to be a public educator, and then to do that 12 months of the year is challenging. And so we're very open about that. Our teachers that work here talk to the teachers that are thinking about either transferring here from other schools in our district or coming into us new from outside of our district. And so the recruitment has not been an issue at all. I have far more high quality candidates that apply and want to be at Wynwood than I would ever be able to hire, because we just don't have high turnover. So it's actually, in the beginning, just, working through those first couple of years, it was more of a challenge, and now it's just not. So.
How did you get the money to pay them?
It's all through basically the district the revenue that comes from the state comes into the district as a whole. It doesn't come in school by school. It's based on the per pupil allocation that's allotted from the state. And also summer school funding that is coming in from the state. We are, because we're in school during June and July, we receive summer school funding for those students coming to us in June and July as well. So because our district is so large, they can reroute some of the funds to Crestview and Wynwood to accommodate for that based on the pool of funding that they get for the per pupil allocation from the state.
Dr. Robinson.
We experienced, just as Dr. Copeland said, so again, remember, we did not add any days to the calendar. So the 3 weeks off, so if you take those 3 weeks, that's 9 weeks. So that was pretty much our summer. So the summer was spread out. So one of the things that we did, we would pay teachers their hourly teacher rate because that was their time off. So our summer school funds were given to us, and that's how we were able to compensate teachers to work 2 of those 3 weeks that students were off. So for example, in the summer, we would have a 3-week summer break. Then fall would be those 3 weeks. And then at what would traditionally be 1 week summer, 1 week spring break, it was actually a 3-week spring break. So no extra funds were needed for our year-round schools because the district did not add any more contract days. We did not have any turnover. It was pretty, the other school, Terman Elementary, that was year-round, we had a husband to one of my teachers worked there, and it actually worked out perfect because both of them were on the same calendar. So I didn't lose any teachers. Recruiting the first year was challenging because we were trying to hire teachers, and we lost teachers through retirement that year, military, but we didn't lose any because we were going year round. But it was kind of that first year, teachers are like, when we were trying to recruit to fill those positions, they were a bit surprised because they're ending in late May, early June, whatever state they were in, jumping right back into school in July. So other than the very first year, we also had no turnover. Our teachers actually were sad to see it go because it seems like when teachers and students might have been feeling a little burnout, here was a 3-week opportunity to take a break. And the way we did our intervention or our reteach, pre-teach, and enrichment, we put a calendar together and we had teachers sign up. So you would have been teaching students outside of your grade level. We wanted teachers to experience having their 3-week break. So every 3 weeks, every teacher did not work. We had teachers sign up. We had an allotted time where they would meet. For example, you possibly could have a kindergarten teacher on the first 3 weeks teaching first and second graders, but the teacher worked with those first and second grade teachers on what she wanted taught. So we always allocated time to plan so those teachers could plan. So when we rolled out our first section of intervention, reteach, pre-teach, those teachers were already ready, but you also had teachers who were taking a break. So there was never a time the entire school was always teaching. So it worked out. We didn't need extra money. Our summer school monies were allocated to us throughout the year versus just a summer school.
Thank you. Dr. Gruder.
I want to thank you for joining us tonight and sharing with us your time and expertise and experience and wisdom. My question is, how do you recommend promoting the balanced calendar to all constituents? There are many already opposed, knowing very little about it, so effective PR advice is appreciated.
I think that the biggest thing to do there is to communicate. to really ensure to have and to communicate in a lot of different ways. And now, of course, because of COVID, we've learned how to use all sorts of new technology tools and forms of communication that I can say as a 19-year veteran principal, I wasn't using prior to March 13th of 2020. So those would now be systems, whether that be things like this, Zoom meetings that for parents that can't come in and meet with you face to face because of work schedule or whatever, going about it in that way, having written communication, translated communication if you're serving a emergent bilingual or a bilingual population or multilingual population, would be important. And just we also had an open line of communication with our front office. So we had kind of question and answer, common questions that could be asked, and then what our office staff could respond with, so that parents knew we kind of had almost like a hotline coming into our front office as far as getting their questions answered when random questions came up that they may hear. The big thing too that is different now from when we rolled this out is the power of social media, either as a positive or a negative. And so I would recommend truly using that platform to make sure that the correct message is out there, because there are very strong opinions on both sides about if going to school longer and for more time is a good thing or a bad thing. It's a very polarized topic, as you're probably experiencing. And so just making sure that the truth is out there about the positives, and really why you're even considering this, would be really, really important from my perspective.
Dr. Robinson, and then right back to Dr. Copeland with how long in advance did you start this process?
So for the first one, to promote the calendar, we showed data. We had multiple town hall meetings. We called them town hall meetings. And prior COVID, of course, we could invite the parents in. I would be out in the parking lot, which I know we do that anyway, at the end of the day, the morning. So we would have a town hall meeting, but I made sure that I was accessible to answer questions as we're ending school. Parents would come up and ask questions, show the research. What is the research? Where are you? What is your purpose for doing this? Is it, for example, I could share our calendar, because our calendar, again, we did not extend days. So that's why they called it modified instead of year round. We just took our summer and we divided that summer up within the school year. So figure out, what is that purpose? Why are we doing this for our children? And what could possibly be the benefits? Looking at the COVID-19 slump versus a summer slump, we also, being that we're in a low socioeconomic area, we looked at the services that we would continue to provide and additional services we would offer. And the daycare was a big one. We found the center that we used gave our parents a really good rate. And so that was truly beneficial to our parents. And also, again, we did this for a year out. So when I was approached to being one of the schools to pilot it, we began that entire year working on, here is the why, here is what we will do, here are the services we will offer. And again, it was no extra, it wasn't a budget problem for our district, because when we did have our 3 weeks, the 2 weeks we brought students back, as far as electricity, lunch, and things like that, we moved all of our teaching to one part of the building. We have 3 units for heat and electricity, so you could shut down the other parts of the building. So we were only utilizing a one section of our building during those times. And again, we started out an entire year, and I was out there just in the community, just talking in the parking lots, wherever. And also I live in the community, so I would be approached quite often. And you're just selling it, and it's all about the kids. That was our selling point.
Thank you. We had a committee member who had to leave, so I will ask her question, which was, you mentioned having a purpose or a goal. So what was the primary reason or purpose in your district deciding to move to a new calendar?
It was definitely looking at when students were coming back, using Dibbles was our end all be all. And again, internally, our summer slump was our selling point. And we wanted to close the achievement gap versus a lot of our students don't attend preschool or kindergartners prior to coming to kindergarten. So it was giving them a little bit of that time that we could work on some of the social skills and then jump into a lot of the academic skills. So that was our selling point. And again, if you'd like, I don't know if Troy was at the district level during that time, but I could share the calendar with Troy. I can upload the calendar with Troy if he would like to share that with you all, the calendar that we use, if that would be something you'd like.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll send that.
I'm sorry, Dr. Copeland?
Yes, ours was the exact same as Dr. Robinson's as far as decreasing or eliminating any summer regression that was occurring with our students based on the student populations that we serve. That was most definitely the purpose and why we looked at switching over. There was kind of a data matrices that our district used to identify the schools that were most in need of the additional instructional time, and Crestview and Wynwood were the two schools that fit all the criteria of the data matrices, if you will. And you'll also find, if you go to the North Kansas City Schools website, you'll find all of our modified calendar. You'll see it called MC. The calendar will have an MC after it, and that's modified calendar, and that's just used at Wynwood and Crestview. You'll see the one that we're operating on now. Our board has also approved our 21-22 calendar and our 22-23 calendar, as well as all the ones from past years are there as well. So you can find those there to kind of look at how we do this here.
Okay. Dr. Hackett, you have a question?
Yes. Again, thanks for being with us, both Dr. Copeland and Dr. Robinson. What cost, and Dr. Copeland, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. What are some costs or increased costs that we have to think about as we approach this topic?
I think that would depend, Dr. Hackett, largely on which, if you were going more with the way in which Dr. Robinson School District approached it or the way North Kansas City Schools approached it. We actually approached it from adding an additional 30 days to the calendar. So then the cost would be increased staffing costs because you're paying people, we pay the daily rate. So whatever their daily rate would be on our district salary scale, that's calculated, and then they're paid that for the additional 30 to 31 days. So there's that cost, there's additional transportation costs, food service costs. However, some of the food service costs ends up not being an issue because our state also has declared us as a school that provides free breakfast and lunch for students or for children 18 years or 17 years and younger. So that cost ended up being a non-issue for us because we qualified for that program. So there's just, and then, running the air conditioner in Missouri in June and July is an expensive cost that the air conditioner has to be set at a lower temperature than it would be if we weren't in school full time as well. So those are some of them. Transportation costs, I think I mentioned that. So just, custodial staff, because everyone works. We call it, it's full on school during that time, not an abbreviated, Monday through Thursday schedule with Fridays off or, a shortened schedule. So all of those costs go into what we had to think about here.
So I think Dr. Robinson addressed childcare. Dr. Copeland, how did this impact childcare for your families?
As far as, are you talking like before and after school care?
And the off times, I guess they're not really different times than other places, but were there concerns around childcare?
No, there were none actually, because we actually alleviated childcare concerns because we were in school for those additional 30 days where normally parents would have had to be paying for care or finding care or securing, family care for their child. Now we were the care, and that's exactly what we wanted to be. That's another reason why we were doing this. And so that was, and then our calendar follows, like I said, from August to May, we follow the district calendar of when their child would be off school anyway, for like those more traditional times of spring break, summer break, winter break, fall break, those kinds of things are all in alignment with the district calendar for August through May. So that was really a non-issue for us because of the fact that we added additional time to the calendar.
What was the public opposition to an extended school year? What do we have to address? What do we have to address?
Dr. Copeland?
Yeah, we do run into some things where we do have students that would travel out of the country, perhaps to their home country during the summer. That was something. We had students that had, like, they were with one parent in the summer for custody and things like that. But so we had to think through that. And so then we just, we have an assessment system that we use. And so we would, as soon as the children, if they couldn't be with us for June and July, because we are their neighborhood school, we certainly can't say, if you can't be here in June and July, you can't come to our school. We can't do that. And we wouldn't want to do that. Obviously, that's not good for kids. And so then when they come to us in August, we quickly determine where they are and put through our MTSS process, put interventions in place to catch them up quickly. But that's really the only thing that I can think of is just, if you have those off situations where it just doesn't work for the family. Our families have gotten really good about, we do have a break in around July 4th, and we do have a break in August before the rest of the district returns for their August start. And so now as I said, we have our calendar out all the way through the end of the 2022-2023 school year. So our families plan for that. Our staff plan even we have weddings that are planned around our calendar so that honeymoons can line up with that and things like that. So people have really gotten good at planning around those times that we're off based on our calendar.
Yeah. I agree with Dr. Copeland for sure. It was sense making, like, what is even the rationale? Because we were the only school, and vacation time, we have quite the families that would go to various camping sites or Arizona for some reason in the summer, even though it's hot, but that was the thing, that was what they did. And that was a challenge for our families to truly understand. And part of those 13 children that left, the 7 families, it was due to vacation time. They had set things that they did yearly, and it just did not work for them.
Okay. We are just right at perfect timing. So thank you both for joining us this evening. And we are so appreciative of your time and your expertise. And if our team has follow-up questions, would you mind if we shoot you those? And maybe Dr. Hackett and I and Ms. Sharp might have a conference call if there are follow-up questions.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Happy to help in any way I can, and certainly wish you well in the journey. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We just, I guess, want to applaud you for participating tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So as a team, we'll debrief a little bit the next time we meet. So if you, and we will put the questions and some of the answers to the questions out in a memo to the committee in the next couple of days. So again, thank you for participating, for submitting your questions, and for serving on the committee.